you in that moment. But I kind of like that. Sometimes it'll be really easy, while others it'll be a bit of a challenge. Adds a nice sense of variety despite the attack being pretty straightforward. Oof, it physically pains me to not have Luiginary stack higher, but I gotta be fair here. The Luiginary stack, while great, is the least exciting of the Luiginary attacks for me. Still a great one, and I like how it's not just needing to time the B presses correctly, but needing to use the circle pad to make sure all the little Luigis are lined up as best as possible for the maximum damage output. Finishing it off with an incredibly Luigi-powered jump, leaving some stray Luigis to fall sideways and Mario get his legs up too. If this move had a little bit more spice to it and better AoE damage output, it'd probably be a bit higher on the list, but I'm still content with it being here. I don't know why, but getting the timing down for Bomb Derby took longer than it probably should have when I first played through Dream Team, but once I got the hang of it, it felt so satisfying to use. It's like a bit of a rhythm game to keep things going. The design of the bombs themselves, as far as I'm aware, are completely unique to the special attack as well. The devs could have easily just made these normal bombs or something, so I appreciate when a little bit of extra work is put into the visuals to make attacks stand out more in a sense. Another good choice special attack to return to Paper Jam. Very fun. Super Bouncer is definitely one of the sillier special attacks in the Mario and Luigi series. It reminds me a lot of Trampoline in concept, only it's just Luigi going to incredibly high heights by himself while Mario thrusts it back upwards after each successful hit. This attack is another one that utilizes the D-pad as well and relies on your quick thinking, because you gotta make sure Luigi is rotated at the top of the ball each time to get it to work, and you gotta still time your B presses. I just love the way he clings onto this thing for dear life. It reminds me of how baby possums run on their mother's back. Cannonball Chuck is a really fun one. Despite being only one motion with no repeats like Super Bouncer, it's more satisfying to use in my opinion, because again, the modern games just make these attacks feel more intense to pull off. I really like the idea of Luigi being physically strong enough to control the momentum perfectly of a cannonball 5 times the size, and there he goes. Oh, good, it's alright. Bye-Bye Cannon is essentially Yoo-Hoo Cannon, but better. Shooting the bros directly at dead enemies? No, that's too easy. These guys fly across the entire island before landing on the enemy. You still gotta remember the order of the clone bros in a quick manner, because they fly off the screen pretty fast. The finisher for this move is amazing as well. All the clones of the bros stack on top of each other in the reverse order that they were shot out of the cannon, spin jumping in succession, and the little pose that the last one does in slow motion. It's so annoying. The very first special attack for Bowser, Goomba Storm, is such a blast to use. Just tapping away at the screen like a madman to see how many Goombas I can get in quick succession. Attacks like these make it feel like I'm playing a WarioWare minigame. And once all the Goombas are lit on fire, they come crashing down one by one on the enemy of your choosing while Bowser grins sadistically in the background. Sick for it. Getting lucky strikes on these multi-hit type attacks are always so fun too. Sometimes if you get multiple in a row, you just hear the unique sound effect playing over and over, and it's great. This isn't unique to Goomba Bros really, but this attack amongst a few others from Inside Story usually gave me more lucky strikes than others. Music to my ears. Balloon Blast is one of those moves where the build-up for the finisher carries it pretty hard for me, because in theory the devs could have made this move a lot more boring where the giant balloon explodes just on its own one time and that's the end of it. But these guys made it to where it's a bunch of smaller balloons doing a bunch of mini explosions over and over across multiple enemies. It's nice how Mario and Luigi do flips to the apex of each jump too instead of just standard jumping. Not sure if this was intentional, but the balloon design looks incredibly similar to the Bowser's Inside Story Super Bouncer. If that was intentional, that's a cute little callback. Chopper Bros and Knockback Bros are without a doubt the most broken Bros attacks in the original version of Superstar Saga. The original advanced versions were the original infinite Mario and Luigi moves if your input timing was good enough. These moves got hard nerfed in the remake for those exact reasons, which is pretty fair to be honest. The game would have been way too easy for veteran players if it was kept the same. But not even including the infinite versions, the original versions just felt a lot more fluid to me, especially Chopper Bros. Regular Chopper Bros in the remake felt like it was going in slow-mo, and the finishing spin with Mario didn't feel as impactful to me. I feel like the change in sound effects played a big part in this too. Knockback Bros in the remake definitely had a more epic finisher, but overall I still enjoy using the original more. Very amazing Bros attacks, but the original versions of them are why they're this high for me. If there was a universe where the remake was the only version, then these would probably be lower on the list. I feel like Mighty Meteor is one of those attacks that more people should bring up when having those very important Sephiroth versus the Mario Bros debates. In all seriousness, this attack was way cooler to me than the previous because, I mean, it's a meteor. Yeah, it works the same as Smash Egg, where you're hitting it back and forth until an item comes out, but it's a meteor. These clever men are hitting a meteor with their hammers using enough force to break it into tiny pieces. That's just awesome. Being able to move the brothers and using the hammer to break it adds a lot for me as well. Like I said earlier, the original standing portion for Smash Eggs is why it didn't really hit for me. The attack felt very lifeless because of that. Whereas Mighty Meteor does the exact opposite, hence why I'm giving it its praises at a much higher spot. On the topic of things going to space, Rocket Blast is a great one. The way it does its little countdown at the start, one of the bros struggling for dear life once you make initial impact, and having to frantically aim the rocket into your enemies at the end, or else you'll just fly off into the side of the screen. The little electric sparks coming from the rocket short-circuiting is a nice touch too. Makes the immediate situation feel more urgent, like you gotta get rid of this rocket as fast as possible or else something bad will happen. Obviously, you won't actually take damage from it, but it's still a bit of extra intensity that might be play. Mario and Luigi running on a skateboard, jetboard dash, had me sold immediately. This is easily my favorite attack when it comes to the ones with the more simple input combos. Luigi being the one to rev the engine on the board is what sells it for me. I know for a fact every kid out there who grew up with a skateboard tried riding it on their stomach at least once in their life. And if you say no, I don't believe it. The slow-mo effect when Mario makes contact with his hammer is always a plus. Never get tired of the slow-mo. And just like Luigi Ball, this was one of the standard bros attacks from Dream Team that got its own official art. I will never get over how good Dream Team's official art style looks, by the way. Absolutely adore the watercolor-esque effects and the blue outer strokes they use. Chef's kiss. Luiginary Ball being the OG Luiginary attack helps out its placing for sure. It's one of those attacks that use motion controls from the 3DS really well in my opinion. Sometimes the motion controls in Dream Team can feel a tad wonky at times, especially during the giant Seakeeper fight, but Luiginary Ball is able to keep things consistent throughout. It's one of the few early game attacks that still feels valuable at all points in the story, which is something I value greatly. And this is because it's got some of the most reliable AoE damage out of any attack in the game, and costs the least amount of BP for the Luiginary attacks. The attack having official art is a nice plus for me too. Maybe that's not the best reasoning in the world, but whenever games have official art for certain things like characters, environments, or abilities, said art will sometimes make me enjoy it more once I'm actually experiencing it in-game. But surely I'm not alone in that sentiment, right? Rocky Bonker is arguably the most iconic special attack of Bowser's Inside Story. I think the reason so many folks like it is because it's one of those attacks that you're consistently working towards obtaining throughout the majority of your playtime as Bowser. Every now and then helping little glitty kitties from danger and reuniting them with their big brother Broggy. Then you can finally use Broggy as part of your own arsenal as Bowser's strongest special attack in the game in terms of damage output. Plus, Broggy is one of the only special attacks in the entire series that allows you to summon an NPC that is completely unique to the Mario and Luigi series. The way Broggy slams into the enemies, it's so cool, followed by the little glitties following suit, the last one taking its sweet time, it never gets old to me. This is another one of those attacks where getting lucky hits on feels so good. Only thing I wish could have been a bit better was the inputs to pull the attack off. You're kind of just dragging the stylus back and forth really fast, you don't need to be super precise with it. Using trio attacks are some of my favorite parts of Paper Jam. Despite me not being super keen on the game as a whole, the trio attacks definitely make up a lot of the good parts for me. I just love how you flatten the enemies into paper with a giant hammer and take them into these unique pocket dimensions to perform some of the wackiest attacks in Mario and Luigi. Every single one feels like a Mario Party minigame. Like, who would have thought that having these guys just playing racquetball with their enemies' bodies would have been so fun? It's definitely the most basic of the trio attacks, hence why it's at the spot, but still very fun to use. I'm extra biased on this one as well, as someone who's played quite a bit of racquetball, pickleball, and ping pong in his lifetime. Some may say those aren't real sports, and to that, I say, shut up. I wouldn't be surprised if I get flamed for having Magic Koopa Mob above Rocky Bonker, but I genuinely do like using this move more when it comes to Bowser's special attacks. It's a nice reminder to us that Bowser can actually use a bit of sorcery on his own, since he's throwing conjured fire from his hand into the Magic Koopa lineup. Sucks how the Inside Story remake changed it to him just breathing fire out. Not sure what the purpose of that was, to be honest. I really wish more games would showcase Bowser's abilities in this regard, because we hardly see it anymore. This game and Galaxy 1, when he summons lightnings, are two of the bigger examples I can think of off the top of my head. The tracing mechanic is nice as well, always doing different orders each time too, so you have to be relatively precise with your tracing. I love magic, and I love this attack. Luiginary Hammer, dude, come on. Using a hammer made up entirely of Luigi's, it's so fun. Having to use the circle pad and spamming B is a really good input setup. Obviously, you want to have as many of Luigi's as possible for maximum damage, but you gotta make sure your circle pad precision is good enough or else the attack will fail altogether. It's not necessarily as reliable as Luiginary Ball when it comes to AoE damage, but it definitely feels better than Luiginary Stack. You're given more room to decide how exactly your damage will be spread to once the hammer is complete, which I also like a lot. The setup for the attack itself is the best part for me though, no doubt. Love seeing Mario try to struggle to keep this giant concoction in the air. Strong ass motherfucker right there. Trio Whirligig is the pinnacle of drill-based Mario and Luigi special attacks. The way the three bros form their own little helicopter formation with Paper Mario serving as the blade, the main portions of the attack to get all the stacks together is a little slow, but the view itself is still nice because of how unbelievably high up in the air you are. This part does remind me of Paratroopa Plug from Mario Party 4, which is one of my favorite Mario Party games. I know it sounds like I'm making a lot of Mario Party comparisons in this video, but I can't really help it. It just seems almost blatant that the devs took inspiration from Mario Party minigames for the newer game special attacks. And of course, the finisher is incredibly satisfying visually. Drilling so fast that sparks and fire appear, lovely eye candy. The hand abilities are some of my favorite abilities in Mario and Luigi, so by default I gotta have Fire Bros and Thunder Bros on the higher end of this list. I know Mario having fire powers isn't really anything new, it's literally one of his old powers, but for some unexplained reason, I like how he's able to conjure it naturally after learning the technique from an ancient deity, whenever he wants without needing to collect power over and over after taking damage. The base Fire Bros attack isn't anything super crazy, but I love the advanced version. Seeing the fireball grow more and more over time, kind of like Mixed Flowers once it's fully complete. Mario spiking that shit down like a volleyball. Oh my god, I love it. This is another set of burst attacks that I feel like was improved for me once the remake came out, because the original had you hammering each fireball individually with Luigi, whereas the remake has you hammer one big one that does multiple hits. But Thunder Bros is still my overall favorite moveset between the two. It's actually kind of insane to me how we haven't gotten more lightning-based powers for either of the Mario Bros in other games. So Superstar Saga having this power and it being attached to Luigi at that makes me appreciate it that much more. Thunder Bros improves too, with the main version having a plasma-like explosion at the end, while the advanced/super version has Luigi striking the enemy with multiple purple lightning strikes. I'd be so happy if the hand powers were brought back in Brothership. I miss them so much. I know I said Cyclone Bros was a nice way to experience a Beyblade-like attack, but Luigiary Wall is the better way to experience this, special attack-wise, that is. You're constantly hitting a single dreamy Luigi back and forth while he swings his hammer into enemies, though you gotta be watchful with how you aim him, because he can either slip past you or go outside the wall due to the other Luigis disappearing slowly whenever the hammering one knocks into them. But if you're able to keep it going long enough, the wall of Luigis will stack on top of each other and come timbering down to deal with its more damage. They look so happy to be falling down like this too. It's hilarious. Creo Meteor feels like Cannonball Chuck on mega steroids. Now these guys are controlling meteors to destroy their foes. Well, I guess technically these meteors might be lighter since they're potentially made of cardboard, but the impact still speaks for itself considering it's the last tree attack in the game. The Bros having their own color-coded meteors to match was a nice touch, but what I love the most is the giant meteor the three of them ride together, with the sky changing from blue to red to add to the attack's intensity, finishing everything off with the platform the enemy stands on being completely destroyed while the Bros fly off in a Paper Mario airplane. This is what we call art right there, boys. Because only thing that can top Fire Bros for fire-related special attacks is a fire-based attack with more Luigis than I can count. The motion for this attack never gets old. It's like a mixture of doing a setup for volleyball while doing a relay race. And if there's one thing about me, is Haikyuu has made me like volleyball a lot more than I thought was humanly possible. The attack getting faster and faster, needing to know if it's going to be set to Mario or the Luigi so you can unleash a barrage of fireballs on your enemies at the end. The sound effects for this attack are really nice at the ears for me too, especially whenever the Luigis bounce more fire up in the air. If these guys created lightning balls instead and kept the same motion, this might have been in the top 5, I'm not gonna lie. I'm still happy with the spot though. Part of me feels weird having Falling Stars so much higher than Mixed Flowers because realistically the attacks are incredibly similar in terms of build-up, though this move does feel more balanced because you can't spam the buttons as fast and it only goes for a single enemy. I kind of like that though because the attack still feels very strong without feeling too overly broken. If Falling Star was AoE, you could just use it against the Dark Star or nothing else and it's super quick. It feels cool that Starlo is actually involved in a special attack for these too. She's decent comedic relief during the Mario and Luigi adventures, but did very little hands-on work, so this was a nice change of pace. Having to aim back at the big star while spamming adds a bit of an extra challenge too. It can be pretty easy to whip sometimes if that thing is moving diagonally, at least in the original version. I'm confident with it being at number 9. Star Rocket being Luigi's ultimate attack in Dream Team definitely earns his title as his ultimate non-Luigiary move. This attack's relatively similar to Falling Star, but the Bros riding on the star adds more fun to the attack for me. It outweighs the simplicity of getting the attack going forward. Tilt controls are unbelievably forgiving with this move because the star you're riding on is the size of Texas, so collecting the little stars feels really easy even when you're starting to speed up. But in my opinion, the finishing blow hard beats out Falling Star. The way the little stars orbit around the brothers as if they're planets themselves, ending with the stars drilling into the enemy like rapid gunfire, it's so incredibly satisfying. But not quite as satisfying as the Luigiary Typhoon, the ultimate Luigiary attack. I just love how you can constantly see the uncomfortable, pained faces of the enemies whenever they're stuck inside this tornado, while the beautiful hammer sound effect bonks the hell out of them over and over again. All the Luigis look so happy, and I'm sure Mario cheering them on to do their best is the reason for this. Tornado-based attacks are just cool to me in general, to be honest. Anytime I play a Kirby game that has Tornado in it, I try to use it as much as humanly possible. It's weird because I despise tornadoes and heavy winds in real life, but I love them in video games. Perhaps it's one of those things where I get some sick kick out of being able to control something I fear? I don't know. With all the hell those padded out Paper Toads mission put me through a Paper Jam, these guys sure can put a cool special attack together. It relies almost entirely on the circle pad, with any of the movements at your disposal being possible with how the trails twist and turn. The controls in this move can be a little tricky and practically all or nothing because if you fall off the trail you do no damage, but pulling it off feels amazing. The Bros spinning into a wheel at incredible speed. If Luigiary Ball was able to have the same level of intensity as well as the option to use the circle pad to move, then these two attacks probably would have been swapped on my list. It sucks how this move is probably one that can never be brought back because of the context of the game it originated in, but I suppose that makes it a bit more special in a sense. Trio Kite may be one of the earliest trio attacks we get in the game, but it's without a doubt my favorite special attack in the series that's mainly centered around magic. The enemy in question turns into a kite while the bros run with a level of intensity that I've yet to see matched in any Mario game. These guys look like they're running on peak adrenaline during this attack. Then to finish things off, Paper Mario just casually climbs the kite string and slams the enemy into the ground with his hammer. The background for this attack looks great too. Very happy scenery to match with flying a kite being a nice leisurely activity you do in the park or something. In terms of single target attacks, this is one of the best in Paper Jam in my opinion when it comes to saving BP and dealing out solid damage. My favorite trio attack in the game is Trio Shuriken. Stellar visuals for its unique pocket dimension of a Japanese-themed dojo to fit with the attack itself, but the only trio attack in the game that's dependent on the amount of Paper Mario stacks you have prior to using it, so extra preparedness is rewarded when using this attack with Rip. The final blow turning Paper Mario into a giant shuriken that opens the sliding doors of the dojo once it hits the enemy, showing a beautiful full moon scenery. And just like Jetboard Dash and Luigi Air Ball, this move got some amazing official art for it. Am I crazy, or did these guys use PD Piranha's render from Mario Super Slickers for that piece on the top left? That's hilarious, it's true. See, it felt like it was a bit of a pain in the ass to actually obtain because you had to free every single pillow in the game, optional ones included. Some of those little freaks were pretty hidden too. But the long mission was well worth the reward in my opinion. Just like Broggy Bonker, it's one of those special attacks that spawns an NPC unique to the Mario and Luigi games. The Z-Keeper of all characters, Pillow Island's guardian who helped take down and task of thousands of years before the game's events. He's got a hilarious personality too, putting on the front of being this overly protective official or guardian, but once you beat him in the giant Luigi fight, he starts talking like he belongs to Gamma Delta Alpha. The bros need to constantly smack the Z-Egg with their hammers over time while you use the circle pad to line up the Z-Keeper in the background, and then the attack with both bros using the hammers together, creating a massive rainbow-colored explosion. I love the way the two of them float down with angry expressions on their faces with what I can only assume is yellow stardust around their bodies. Almost makes them feel like godlike beings. Which, to be fair, they kind of are, but it's nice that there's a visual cue around them to help evoke that these guys really are on a different level. As much as I love the Mario Bros looking badass, sometimes them being silly little guys with how they attack their foes can edge out those badass attacks. Snack Basket is one of those rare instances for me. Besides Broggy Bonker, I'd say this is also the most iconic special attack from Bowser's Inside Story. Luigi just stuffing his face with sugar and turning into this adorable abomination. Now look at this fat bastard. If they made beanbags out of this version of the Luigi, I'd buy it. It'd also be vintage in a sense because this big-ass Luigi only appeared in Inside Story. Mario picking him up using every fiber of his being, followed by Luigi doing a flip in midair into a belly flop on the ground to do massive damage to all grounded enemies. That's the only small disadvantage to this attack in terms of versatility. Airborne / high-up enemies can't take damage from it. But that's not enough for me to drop this attack below top 2 because everything else about it is amazing. It's the only attack in the game that's absolutely required to use on a boss for story progression too. Usually I'm not a huge fan of when RPGs do this. I went on record saying the way Sticker Star and Color Splash do that wasn't the most fun in the world for me, but with how hilarious and fun Snack Basket is to use, that typical annoyance cancels out for me. Yet it's not quite as great for me as this one.
I'm overthinking things.
The Krabby Patty! Megathwonk is the peak of Mario and Luigi special attacks. Dream Team's giant fights did an incredible job at not only giving Luigi more time to shine in a serious battle, but did wonders for his character development throughout the game. So the fact that Paper Jam brought back that part of Dream Team by allowing Luigi to turn into a giant again was an incredible surprise. The attack follows the path of needing to press B to match with giant Luigi's running while Mario rides on his hammer. Once that's done, Luigi smacks the fuck out of the foe with his hammer, allowing Mario to do his jumps in between with enough force to have the enemies bounce off the ground back into him multiple times. This attack's finisher is the best in the series as well. The final jump Mario does, just grinding them into the ground while he has the most pissed look on his face, it never gets old. This is another thing that's really underrated about the Dream Team and Paper Jam Bros attacks in my opinion. The Bros are so expressive whenever they use these moves, mostly looking angry like they want to defeat these foes with every fiber of their being. We need more games where Mario and Luigi look pissed while fighting. They're fighting people that are preventing them from saving the world in every game. They deserve to look more pissed. It helps add a bit to the game's immersion, even if it's just slight. I will forever cherish this attack, and I would love to see if Brothership's Bros attacks can somehow one-up this one. But yeah, this is my ranking of every special attack from the Mario and Luigi games. The finishing moves in last place and Megathwonk in first. Actually, the finishing moves aren't technically special attacks. The all-knowing Mario Wiki says they are, so lick my grandma. This was a very productive use of my time. Huge thanks to my gold tier patrons, BFP4, Lunar,
Oh, that's easy.
When someone shows me a new Yu-Gi-Oh card, there's a lot of elements that need to be looked at before deciding if the card is good or bad or just mediocre. Now the first thing that I always look at is the effect of the monster. That usually is what matters the most out of anything. Then I might look at the name to see if it falls in an archetype, followed by maybe the type and attribute and levels to see if I can do anything interesting with those attributes. And then finally, after all of that, I look at the attack and defense. And this kind of goes along with my idea that the attack points on Yu-Gi-Oh cards and the defense points as well don't really matter. And in today's video, we're going to talk about why attack points have sort of mattered less and less as the game's history has gone on, and also why this is different than other card games. And then at the end of it, I do want to mention some situations where attack stats and defense stats actually do matter, because it's incorrect to say that they don't matter ever, they just don't matter a lot. There are two major reasons that I think the attack and defense points on a monster card don't matter that much in most situations. Now the first reason is that Yu-Gi-Oh has so many different ways to remove cards off of the board, and this is really important because way back in the day this wasn't so much in ample supply. I mean, yeah, we had spell cards like Radeki and Dark Hole, but pretty much all of the spot removal that were on Yu-Gi-Oh cards were found in the effects of spell cards. But nowadays pretty much every single archetype you look at is going to have some form of removal, not only competitive strategies but also the rogue strategies as well. And I might even go as far as say that even casual strategies usually have at least one or two forms of spot removal just sort of guaranteed when anyone builds a deck list, which means that no matter how high the attack stats of a card are, a lot of times you can just get rid of it outside of the means of battle, which is pretty different from a lot of games. The second reason that attack points might not matter is that the extra deck exists in Yu-Gi-Oh and not in other card games. So when I think about other card games, pretty much the monsters in your main deck are going to be what you're attacking with turn in and turn out, but in Yu-Gi-Oh that's not really the case. And I think especially in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh, many of the decks out there, the main monster cards, the main deck monster cards at least, they're just stepping stones to get to the bigger extra deck ones, which don't have the downside of drawing them at inopportune times, and they often have really big effects and really big attacks. They're just good cards in general, and I know that there are going to be some sort of OG Yu-Gi-Oh fans that watch this video, and while I do understand your perspective, the fact of the matter is that we've had synchro summoning for 10 years now, so it's kind of silly to say, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh has gone in the direction of extra deck summoning only recently, because actually at this point the majority of Yu-Gi-Oh has been extra deck focused. Now obviously the focus has changed a little bit over those 10 years with synchro monsters, but even still, synchro monsters back in the day did have really good effects and a lot of attack points, and you could consolidate a tuner monster and another monster into those bigger monsters, which is very similar to what we're seeing nowadays with Exceed summoning and Link summoning. So this makes a huge difference compared to other card games, because in other card games, whatever monsters you have in your main deck, that's what you're going to be attacking your opponent's monsters with. But in Yu-Gi-Oh, many decks actually just have the end goal of getting a whole bunch of little monsters on the board that as easily as possible, only to upgrade into those stronger extra deck monsters, which means that there isn't a huge weight on the attack points of
oh my god, I can't read her name.
You're really going to be using them for attacking.
It's black, that's on black cover.
And also despite the fact that I said at the beginning of this video that the attack and defense stats are the last thing that I look at when I'm looking at a new card, I'm not really saying that attack points never matter, so I'm going to mention some points when they actually do matter. Now the number one area that I feel that attack points actually do come up in is when you're trying to bait a big monster's effect before you actually make your main play. Now what do I mean by this? Well, I saw this happen a lot when Masterpiece and Zodiac Trident were in the game. Zodiac Trident usually going to have a lot of attack points, which is a little different from Masterpiece, which did have a lot of attack points, but in both cases, one of the best ways to actually bait those effects was to simply summon a monster that could attack over them, because that kind of forced them to use their destruction effects on whatever monster had all those attack points. Now, Zodiac Trident often was sort of supplied with the extra benefit of Zodiac Whiptail, giving it the option to banish something that attacked it, but if you summoned something that could somehow dodge that Whiptail effect, they often had to waste the Trident effect to try to destroy whatever you summoned that could just run over their monster. And also, they didn't always have the Whiptail. I mean, oftentimes they did, because they did search it with Broad Bowl, but in the cases that they didn't have Whiptail, they were actually forced to use that Trident effect unless they wanted it to be run over by battle and then completely miss out. And in the case of Masterpiece, it's a little different because oftentimes that card was protected somewhat from Dragonic Diagram, but in the cases where they attributed a spell card to summon it, they didn't have that extra attack points, they didn't have that extra protection effect, which means that if you summon a monster with more than 2950 attack, your opponent was pretty much forced to actually use the Masterpiece before you just ran it over in battle. So I think one of the best scenarios where attack points actually really do matter is when you're trying to push through a board without using your own effects and hopefully bait your opponent into using their destruction effects or their negation effects so that you don't just run those cards over in battle. The other example where you really want to have attack points is when the deck actually doesn't have a ton of spot removal. Now this might not seem like it comes up a lot in Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And that certainly is true, but I think of the pre-Sky Striker variant of Trick Stars, where pretty much their only form of removal in the entire main and extra deck was Borreload Dragon, which they had to hard draw the unsearchable 3 of Scapegoat to actually make. And this actually led many Trickstar players, and even myself in some of my rogue strategies, to play the card Eater of Millions. Now I've talked about that card in another video, where Eater of Millions really shouldn't be that good of a card, but the fact remains that Eater of Millions is a free level 1 monster that was a really good 1-for-1 piece of spot removal every single turn, and the only reason Eater of Millions was played was because the decks it was being played in lacked spot removal, such as Trick Stars before the Sky Striker. If you wonder why Eater of Millions was so good in that strategy, it's because the Trickstar cards themselves are so tiny and they have no spot removal effects, so much so that in deck profiles, even to this day, as recently as the Triff Gaming Pendulum deck profile, he literally says if you summon a Chronograph Sorcerer, which has 2000 attack, Trickstars actually can't out it because it's too big. And I'm not going to say to the extreme cases that that's actually true, but in many cases that actually does work out. I recently talked about my Altergeist deck profile where I played Cyber Dragon, and one of the reasons that I played Cyber Dragon is because Trickstars actually still, even with the Sky Striker cards, have issues outing those big monsters, and the Cyber Dragon can easily rank up into the 2400 attack fusion monster, which makes it even harder to deal with, even if the monsters that are bigger than the Trickstar monsters don't have protection effects. It just, Trickstars have a really tough time dealing with those strategies, so it's not often that the top deck doesn't have a ton of ways to remove monsters. I think in the past, usually the top decks have a variety of ways to do that. If we think back to Zoo, they had not only Whiptail, but also Trident and tons of other ways to actually get cards off the board. But in the format like the one that we're in right now, where the best deck, or one of the best decks, simply doesn't have a lot of ways to remove cards, well then high attack points are definitely going to matter. And I can kind of think of the opposite as someone that's played Altergeist. One of the biggest issues is that the two main Trickstar monsters, Lycoris and Candina, both of them, well, in Lycoris' case, it is equal to the highest attack point of all the Altergeist cards, but in Candina's case, there's no Altergeist main deck monsters that actually can deal with that card without going into the extra deck, which makes a big difference because one of the forms of spot removal in Altergeist is the Kieran card that bounces cards back to the hand, but you don't want to bounce Candina back to the hand, which means if you want to remove those cards from the field effectively, you pretty much have to use the level 1 Altergeist monster, but you don't always have access to that card, and the Trickstar deck is obviously really good at applying pressure, so if you don't draw that card immediately, you're in for a rough time. So even in the case of Altergeist, just a few hundred attack point difference on several of the cards, I think even if just Marionetta had 1900 attack points, that matchup would be infinitely easier, but once again, this is a case where the strategy doesn't have a ton of spot removal outside of the level 1 monster, very similar to the old Trickstar decks that only had the Scapegoat into Borreload or the Eater of Millions to remove one monster at a time. But that pretty much wraps up this discussion. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Once again, I wasn't trying to say that attack points never matter. I was trying to go through some examples of why attack points are usually the last thing to look at, but that they do still come up. I remember old Zoo format before we had the Northern combo. A lot of people mentioned that Fire Formation Tenki was super crucial in the mirror match because it made everything 100 points bigger than your opponent's monsters, which meant that some of them were pretty tough to deal with. People talked about how they would just summon multiple copies of Thoroughblade, they had 1700 attack, you had a Tenki up, and that was actually pretty hard to out in the in your match outside of making Zodiac Trident, but even making Trident just to pop the Third Blade wasn't the greatest play. You would want to get a little more value out of it than just that. But I hopefully you guys knew this discussion. I will see you later. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know some cases that you've come across where attack points really don't matter, or where attack points actually matter a lot. I will see you guys later. Bye.
失敗だバーガーやってみます全力だぜもっと力を決めてみせます。この戦いは負けられません。お主と何を売るのじゃ？何にするのじゃ？何にどうするのじゃ？銭を貯めたらまた来るのだぞ。
おや、何を報告するんだい？それじゃ頼んだよ。
あ、また来たな。夕方まででいいの？どうするの？